On the night my marriage announced its own exit, I polished the flatware until I could see a steadier version of myself. I ironed the linen runner twice, breathed on crystal until it sang, and lined place cards beside porcelain plates that used to be my mother's. The oak table caught the candlelight and reflected it back like a stage. If you can control the scene, you can control the story. My mentor in the audit department once told me that. I believed it enough to measure the distance between forks with. The guest list was a carefully stacked tower: my sister Sharon, my husband Keith, our son Cal, 2 cousins from his side who always dressed like they were going to court, and one austere aunt who tutored posture like it was a religion. I'd invited them for a simple reason: numbers look honest when there are witnesses. Keith arrived last, carrying expensive noise in a bottle and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He stopped in the doorway, admiring the room like a buyer touring a model home. "Elaine, this is magazine level," he said. "You outdid yourself." I smiled the way good accountants smile, pleasantly, neutrally, without confessions. "Coats in the hall," I said. "Dinner's plated in 10. Sharon slipped in behind him, her perfume ahead of her by a step. She wore a dress you're meant to notice and a smile you're meant to forgive. When she hugged me, her cheek was cool and careful, like she was worried my skin might stain hers. "You look amazing," she whispered, which is what people say when they want your guard down. Cal held out his hand to take the wine from Keith, and Keith ruffled his hair like Cal was still 7. Cal turned 17 next month. I had an entire spreadsheet documenting his college visits and which schools had decent dorm laundry facilities. It's how my mind keeps the world from spinning too fast. Cells, formulas, balances. We sat, the candles softened edges. I'd planned for that. The roast warmed the room with butter and rosemary. Small talk arrived in predictable bursts: parking, traffic, a neighbor's new fence that looked like it belonged around a museum rather than a bungalow. I waited through it the way you wait through a company meeting agenda so you can get to the audit findings at the end. Keith stood with his glass and tapped it with a fork. "Before we eat," he said, "I'd like to make a toast." Every head lifted. Sharon set her napkin on her lap with exaggerated grace. Cal gave me the smallest look, a question mark drawn in his eyes, and I laid a hand flat on the table. "Steady, steady." Keith cleared his throat. "I'm divorcing Elaine," he said. "For Sharon." The words clattered in the space and lay there, like cutlery dropped on stone. A few forks paused mid-air. Someone gasped. The aunt who worshipped posture straightened further, which should have been physically impossible. Sharon folded her hands and stared down at them like she was making a wish over a birthday cake. I didn't look at Sharon. I looked at the linen runner between us and counted the tiny woven diamonds, one by one. Then I lifted my eyes slowly, as if they were heavy from numbers and not from anything else. "Please check your emails," I said. "Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." A ripple of confusion moved around the table. Keith laughed once, a single bark, as though I'd told a clever joke. "Elaine," he said, "come on, let's keep this." Phones lit up, index fingers swiped, heads tilted. A digital symphony of alerts bloomed under the candlelight, small glass rectangles casting cool light on warm faces. I stayed still, hands folded, breath measured. The first cousin frowned. "Why did I get a deed?" The other cousin blinked at his screen. "Is this the mortgage release?" Sharon's face brightened and then dimmed, as if a cloud had passed over the candle. "What is this?" she whispered, and the question wasn't meant for me. Keith's grin stretched, then trembled, then forgot itself. He scrolled faster, his glass tipped and steadied without spilling. "That's my signature," he said, the words thin. "Yes," I said, "filed weeks ago." I reached for my water and took a slow sip. "Congratulations, you're finally independent." Sharon's lips parted, then closed, then pressed together. She looked at him, then at me. You can't just... I didn't just anything, I said. The condo title transfer is lawful. You signed. The release of the joint mortgage was formalized the day after your firm's retreat. As for the joint account closure, the consent was notarized and uploaded by your assistant. Elaine, Keith said, voice low. This is outrageous. No, I said. This is organized. Cal's phone stayed face down on the table. He looked at me with a steadier version of my own expression. He had my eyes, my dark, even brow. He had Keith's jawline, square and stubborn. I'd once believed a family could be built like a well-kept ledger. Clear categories, recorded transactions, reconciliations at the end of each month. Then I learned about off-book entries. Sharon's hand found the stem of her glass. I don't understand. I'm sure that's true, I said. Keith breathed out, looked around, realized he had an audience again, and switched registers into something that sounded like charm, but felt like an invoice. Look, he said, lifting his palm. There's been tension. It happens. Emotions run high, and we made mistakes, but there's no need to make a show. This isn't a show, I said. It's documentation. I nodded toward their phones. Please scroll. They scrolled. The cousins murmured. The aunt removed her glasses, polished them, and set them on again, as if the lenses had been at fault. Sharon read an email twice, and then a third time, her eyes jumping like misaligned scanner light. You moved the savings, Keith said. To where? A trust, I said. For Cal. Irrevocable. That's... He stopped before naming it. He knew the language as well as I did. We had built a home in a city of papers, statutes, and forms. If romance had been our first language, filings had become our second. Mine was more fluent than he knew. Sharon found her voice. I gave up so much for... She clamped her mouth and looked at me, worried her words might slip and break on the table. For him, I offered. Or for yourself? I shrugged. Either way, your sacrifices are not listed among our household assets. The roast cooled inch by inch. Butter and rosemary retreated into the air. Cal leaned back, arms crossed, eyes not moving from Keith's face. He knew better than to speak now, but I could feel a hum around him, a held chord. Keith sat. He set his phone down carefully as though it carried heat. You had no right to do this without talking to me. I did talk, I said. You weren't listening. That's not fair, he said. Fairness is a playground word, I said. In my work, we use accuracy. He rubbed his jaw and gave a shorter laugh. You're punishing me. You're attributing motive, I said. I'm accounting for risk. The aunt coughed like a judge calling a recess. Perhaps this is not the moment, she said. We should eat before it gets cold. It already has, I said, and lifted my fork. For a few minutes, we tried to chew around the new shape of the evening. Sharon's hand shook each time she reached for the salt. Keith cut his portion into unnecessary squares. The cousins murmured to each other about transferable titles, in between compliments to the garlic. Finally, Sharon set her fork down. I love him, she said, voice steady now because she'd found a sentence that felt like it could anchor her. I looked at her for the first time since her entrance. She had been my little sister once. She'd followed me from room to room, trying on my sweaters, borrowing my shoes, leaving her bright plastic bracelets in my top drawers. We had fought about small things, and then about large ones. I knew where she learned manipulations, because I remembered teaching her how to bargain with our mother for late curfews. We'd grown up learning to perform for attention the way other kids learned piano. I forgave her once, then again, each time telling myself it was the last. You're confusing momentum with love, I said. You two created a story you couldn't stop. It isn't a story, she said. It's real. So is the trust, I said, evenly. So is the deed. Keith pushed back his chair. Elaine, enough. You want to humiliate me. You've done it. But none of this changes how we feel. I don't care how you feel, I said. I care how you act. I set my napkin down. which brings me to the second course. The cousins looked relieved, as though I meant actual food. I didn't. I reached into the sideboard and took out a small folder in a plain leather cover. My hands were steady. Practice does that. Auditors are trained to lift whole stories with 2 fingers. I brought copies, I said, of the premarital clause assigning vehicle ownership to me. You signed that too. It's not dramatic. It's practical. You work long hours. I manage the bills. We thought it made sense. Keith's forehead creased. He remembered the kitchen table, the pen, the jokes we made about me being the only one with a sensible relationship to interest rates. He remembered the day we decided I would keep our titles tidy and our insurances paid. You're taking my car, he said. I sold it this afternoon, I said. It was a good price. Sharon inhaled sharply. You can't. Again, I said softly. I can. Keith's jaw worked. You've planned this, he said. For how long? I plan everything, I said. It's my profession. Silence expanded. Not theatrical, just full. The aunt reached for a roll and buttered it with such precision it felt like a prayer. The cousins took identical sips of wine. Outside, a siren drew a line through the street and passed on, as if to remind us that other lives were ongoing, other dinners progressing without announcements. Why did you invite everyone? Sharon asked. Why not just talk to us? Because truth behaves better in company, I said. It stands up straight. I turned to Keith. As do ethics boards. A cousin choked on his wine. Ethics boards? Keith's eyes flashed that familiar warning I used to think meant protect me. Now I understood it meant protect yourself. Elaine, he said. I placed my fork down. Grant should have received an email by now, I said. A standard notice regarding compliance. Grant? The aunt leaned forward despite herself. She admired authority the way some people admired poetry. Yes, I said. Your mentor. The one who likes to call me numbers girl when he wants me to feel small. I smiled. Pleasantly, neutrally. He'll understand the attachments. Attachments? Keith's voice thinned again. Expense reports, I said. Client dinners. Reimbursements that read like fables if you're careful with the line items. I was careful. Cal looked at his plate and then at me. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and even. Mom, he said. Yes, honey. Are we safe? I did not look at Keith or Sharon then. I looked only at my son. We are, I said, because I know where the levers are and how to use them without breaking the machine. He nodded once, accepting a language he'd heard his whole life, not fear, not drama, but architecture. Keith laughed again, but softer. You would ruin me. I would organize you, I said, and if you are ruined by organization, that is not my doing. We ate eventually. The food cooled and then settled. Stories slid around the table and bumped one another like objects set adrift in a shallow bowl. No one praised the roast anymore. When plates were cleared, I poured coffee. Sharon didn't take any. Keith did, but he didn't drink it. The cousins began gathering their things, their eyes avoiding mine the way men in elevators avoid mirrors when they've cried. The aunt stood without creaking and placed a hand on my shoulder, a dignified squeeze that was more honest than anything she'd said all evening. I'll see myself out, she murmured. Thank you for coming, I said. At the door, people tried to smile. Eventually, the house exhaled and left the 4 of us in the dining room. Me, Keith, Sharon, and Cal, who was rinsing plates without being asked, shoulders squared, movements efficient. Keith waited until the water was off. Elaine, he said, we can discuss terms. You don't have to. You discussed terms without me, I said, for months. I looked at Sharon. How many holidays did you rehearse in the mirror? She looked down. Her hands twisted the linen napkin on her lap into a rope. I didn't want to hurt you. You wanted to get what you wanted, I said. That's different. Keith's phone buzzed across the table like a trapped insect. He didn't reach for it. Another buzz, then another. He picked it up. His color shifted in a way only accountants would notice, a few shades closer to the paper beneath him. He read. He read again. He held the phone an inch farther from his face and blinked. "What is it?" Sharon said, leaning in. Keith swallowed. "Grant," he said. He stopped. He didn't finish the sentence because he'd reached the part where breath meets consequence. I didn't speak. The candles had burned low, making the table look older than it was. Wax had pooled like small lakes at the base of each wick. I watched the nearest flame bow, straighten, bow again, a polite usher at the end of a performance. Cal dried his hands on a dish towel and came to stand beside me. He didn't touch my shoulder. He didn't need to. He simply stood, a line drawn where I could see it. Keith rose too quickly, the chair scraping. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said. "You and me." "You'll talk to your firm tomorrow," I said. "We've said everything we need to say tonight." Sharon stood, unsteady for the first time, and moved toward the hall. "I should go," she murmured. "Take your time," I said. "I labeled the leftovers." Keith's phone brightened again. He glanced down instinctively, because we all do, and then he went still. I didn't have to ask. The message preview told its own short story in bolded subject lines. He tapped it open. He looked up at me. He tried to shape anger, and failed. What he settled on was disbelief, which is anger's quieter cousin. "You sent this to Grant?" he asked. "To the board?" "I sent it where it belonged," I said. He nodded once, as if accepting a verdict only he could hear. Then he turned away and called down the hall. "Sharon, let's go." She emerged with her coat, eyes unsure where to land. She looked at me, then at Cal, then back at me. For a heartbeat, she wore the face of my little sister, asking if I could read her a story. Something nipped at my throat, but I did not feed it. "Good night," I said. They left. The door closed with polite decisiveness. The house adjusted its shoulders. Cal began stacking plates again out of habit, but I touched his forearm. "Leave it," I said. "Sit with me a minute." We sat at the table, the candles shorter than when we started, the linen runner no longer crisp but still serviceable. Tools look different after they're used. The air smelled like citrus and resolve. "Mom," Cal said after a while, "what happens next?" "We keep the lights on," I said. "We tell the truth when asked. We don't gloat." He nodded. "Is it okay that I feel relieved?" "It's okay to feel what you feel," I said. "Just don't post it." My phone vibrated once. A new message sat in my inbox, subject bold and simple. Compliance notice. The sender was exactly who I expected. The timing was too. I didn't open it yet. I looked at the oak table, at the careful rings where cups had sat, at the ghost of steam above the coffee that Keith never drank. I remembered the first time we'd eaten here, the night we moved in, sitting on boxes and pretending pasta in takeout containers tasted like celebration. I remembered Sharon standing in this same doorway last spring, telling me she'd found a new workout class and asking for a ride because her car was in the shop. Lies travel in friendly clothes. Cal stretched his legs under the table and looked at the cooling candles. "You're really calm," he said. "I've been living with a plan," I said. "When the plan arrives, you recognize it." He studied me the way he used to study Lego manuals, mapping where each piece would go. "What do you need me to do?" "Homework," I said. "Sleep. Tell me if you need anything." He nodded, stood, and then leaned down to kiss the top of my head. "I'm here," he said. "I know," I said. After he went upstairs, I opened the email. The first line was formal, the kind that announces its own suit and tie. The attachments were thicker than I expected. Grant's name appeared where it needed to appear. Keith's too. The dates lined up like careful formation. Numbers rarely lie, but they do hide. I had found them and brought them into the room, and now they were going somewhere official, where rules wear badges and carry clipboards. I closed my laptop and blew out the nearest candle. The room dimmed gently. Then I stood, gathered the plates, and began to wash, Not because I had to, but because my hands needed a familiar task that promised a tidy outcome. The night had more emails to deliver, more phones to flare and buzz in other rooms across the city. Somewhere, Grant's screen would bloom with the same subject line that now rested in my inbox. He would lean back in his chair and examine his reflection in the black edge of the monitor and wonder, perhaps for the first time in a long while, whether a story told in rooms like his could be revised. Upstairs, Cal's door closed. Water ran in the bathroom, then stopped. I walked down the hall, opened my dresser, and folded the linen napkins one by one. My phone vibrated again. Another subject line, identical to the first, from a different sender inside the firm. The board was awake. I smiled without showing teeth. On my screen, one new message waited. From Grant, short and precise. You win. He's finished. But what did you send the board exactly? I didn't answer. I held the final thought of the day like a ledger line under a sum. I wish I could tell you I felt triumphant. Mostly I felt the way I do in the final minutes of an audit, when the last discrepancy finally reveals where it hid. Not joy, just the comfort of alignment. People think accountants crave order because we fear chaos. That's a cute story. The truth is, I like seeing the whole picture laid out, even if it's ugly. It means I won't stumble over it in the dark. There is a way a house sounds when a plan clicks into place. The refrigerator hum evens out. The radiator's tick seems friendly. Even the stair risers stop complaining underfoot. I listened to those ordinary confirmations and let them steady me. I wasn't fearless. I was prepared. In bed, I thought of Cal at 7, asleep on the back seat after a summer movie, his fingers sticky from lemonade, his sneaker pressing a crescent in the upholstery. I promised then to be a reliable surface in his life. Reliability doesn't mean staying. It means showing up with the truth and the paperwork that proves it. Tomorrow, I would make breakfast, pull the trash to the curb, and answer calls from people who preferred rumor to records. I would do the tasks a day requires, and I would not flinch. On my nightstand, the calculator from my certification course sat beside a dog-eared notebook. I flipped it open and wrote a single line. Assets protected, liabilities disclosed, narrative controlled. Then I clicked off the lamp and let the house hold me up. Tomorrow, numbers would speak for me. Morning sunlight doesn't lie. It lands on everything, including the wreckage. When I opened the curtains, the glass glared back like an audit sheet. The house was quiet, except for Cal's steady rhythm in the kitchen, his version of calm. I followed the smell of coffee and found him slicing a bagel with the precision of someone avoiding conversation. Morning, I said. He nodded without looking up. You slept? Enough. That was true in the accountant's sense of truth. The numbers matched even if the story behind them was longer. The newspaper on the counter already carried what Keith must have feared. A financial column buried halfway down the page mentioned an internal compliance alert at Grant & Lowell, LLP. The journalist didn't know yet who triggered it, but the timing was no coincidence. Cal poured 2 mugs. You're in the news, he said. Indirectly, I corrected. Always better that way. My phone blinked with unread messages. 2 from Tessa Vaughan, 1 from a blocked number that I didn't have to open to recognize. The subject lines told enough. Call me. You went too far, Elaine. Please. Tessa's were cleaner. Got your files. Call me before noon. I sipped the coffee. You're leaving for school? Yeah, Cal said. Should I be worried about Dad showing up? He'll be busy, I said. Doing what? Damage control. Probably starting there. He grabbed his backpack, hesitated. Mom? Yes. I'm proud of you. It was the kind of sentence that sticks to your ribs. Thanks, I said. He left. The door closed with that gentle thunk only newer hinges make. By 9, the Maserati was gone from the driveway. I'd sold it legally at 6:45 a.m., signing the digital transfer on my tablet. A buyer from Scottsdale had wired the funds instantly. They now rested safely in Cal's trust. The app confirmed everything in neat blue digits. Tessa arrived 15 minutes later, hair tucked under a beanie, laptop slung like a weapon. She moved fast and talked faster. "You detonated a law firm," she said by way of greeting. "I filed some documents." She grinned. "You're underselling yourself." "I'm an accountant," I said. "We live for understatement." She opened her laptop at my dining table, which was still too clean from last night's battlefield. "The texts you gave me, from Sharon to Keith, are 5 years deep. Are you sure you want me to use them?" "Yes," I said, "but keep them anonymous. No names." "Anonymous, but obvious." "That's the art." Tessa nodded. "You know they'll figure it out anyway." "They always do," I said. She leaned back. "Grant must be panicking. He's built his career on moral posture. Then he should enjoy a stretch." Tessa laughed. "You're colder than you look." "I'm organized," I said. "Not cold." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "My newsletter goes out at 5. Expect the city's lawyers to read it before dinner." I watched the words appear on her screen, the price of perfect marriages, and felt the faintest sting of irony. The article wove around quotes, statistics, and screenshots, blurred just enough to skirt libel. It was surgical. At 11, Sharon burst into my office downtown without knocking. Her voice cracked the air before the door finished closing. "You can't take what's his." I didn't stand. "It never was." She slammed a folder onto my desk. "Do you realize what you've done to me?" "I do," I said. "I did the math." She pointed at the computer. "You think this makes you some hero? You're destroying—" "I'm correcting," I said. Sharon's eyes were red but dry. "He loves me." "That's your defense?" I asked. She blinked, struggling for words. "You're cruel." "No," I said softly. "I'm precise." I pushed a small stack of printed pages toward her. "Take these." "What are they?" "Screenshots," I said. "Keith's messages about you. I thought you might want to read what he calls you when you're not around." Her hand hovered. "You're lying." "I don't have to," I said. "It's all time-stamped." She didn't take them. She just stared until her voice fell into a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen." "You meant exactly this," I said. "You just didn't plan the outcome." She left the papers where they were and walked out without closing the door. By noon, Keith's name trended locally on the firm's intranet. Someone leaked the board's memo about pending review of client reimbursement policies. Lawyers love euphemisms. They wrap chaos in Latin. At 1, Keith called. I let it ring. He texted instead, "You can't win this way." I typed back, "I already balanced the books." Minutes later, a formal email arrived from Grant himself. "Please refrain from distributing internal documents until further notice." I forwarded it to my personal folder labeled Predictable Responses. By 3, Tessa's article was live. My phone buzzed non-stop. The comments section turned into a slow-moving avalanche of sympathy and gossip. Sharon's social media pages flooded with vague messages. "We're praying for you. Stay strong. Hope it's not true." She responded with emojis until she stopped posting entirely. Around 5, I walked to the window overlooking the city's grey afternoon. Office towers looked less like power and more like balance sheets, columns of glass filled with invisible debt. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a photo from Cal, his debate club, smiling around a cheap pizza. "We won regionals," he wrote. I smiled. "Proud of you," I replied. "Home by 7. When I left the office, Sharon was waiting by the elevators, eyes swollen but furious. "You think you've won?" she said. "There's no scoreboard," I said. "There's always a scoreboard." I stepped past her, then checked the totals. She followed me into the parking structure, voice rising. "You can't just erase people." "I don't erase," I said. "I reconcile." She slapped the folder she still carried against my arm. You've ruined everything. It was already unstable, I said. You'll regret this, she hissed. I don't do regret, I said, unlocking my car. It doesn't balance. When I reached home, Cal was on the couch with homework spread like blueprints. Heard from Dad? He asked. He tried, I said. Cal looked uneasy. His firm called the house earlier. Some assistant asked if he could retrieve files. He won't need them, I said. Dinner was quiet. The clink of silverware echoed the memory of last night's performance. Afterward, I checked my email one more time. A new message from the firm's HR appeared. Security badge deactivated for Keith Merrin. Please confirm receipt of personal property. I confirmed. At 10, Tessa called, excitement in her voice. You did it. The board suspended him. Grant's scrambling to control the narrative. You're front-page gossip now, but you're also the one holding all the receipts. I never wanted fame, I said. Too late, she said. You're the story people tell themselves when they think justice might exist. After the call, I turned off my lamp and stared at the reflection in my office window. I didn't look triumphant. I looked like someone who'd finally filed a report that took 5 years to finish. Downstairs, Cal's room glowed under the door. I heard the soft rhythm of typing. College essays, perhaps. Life continued, numbers rolling forward, balances updating. The next morning would bring new headlines, new calls, maybe even apologies disguised as negotiations. But tonight, the house was steady, the air clean, the silence not accusing but earned. And somewhere across town, a card reader blinked red when Keith tried to enter his own office. By the third morning, the city smelled like rain and anxiety. I liked both. They kept people honest. I drove to work early, the radio low, listening for my own name in the gossip segments. Nothing yet, which meant Tessa had done her part carefully. The firm, however, wasn't silent. My phone buzzed every 10 minutes with new filings, rumors, or half-baked cease-and-desist drafts. None had teeth. Grant Lowell's reputation hung like an oil painting in every hallway downtown, polished, framed, and quietly cracking at the edges. He'd mentored Keith for a decade, called him the firm's future, and introduced Sharon to half the social events where she'd learned to play loyal spouse before becoming a public secret. Now, Grant faced a review board he used to chair. That's what symmetry looks like. My inbox filled with digital smoke, internal memos, partners trying to distance themselves, assistants pretending confusion. One email stood out. Subject line, you made your point. Let's meet. Signed, Keith. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the security feed from our front porch, just in case. His car never appeared, but habit is a strong drug. At noon, my lawyer, an even-tempered woman named Ruth, called. He filed an injunction, she said. On what grounds? Voluntary asset relinquishment, she said, almost laughing. He's trying to claim he didn't understand the premarital clause. He's a lawyer. Exactly, Ruth said. We'll dismantle it in one line. She emailed the draft response while we spoke. Claimant cannot assert ignorance of his own contract. I smiled. Legal simplicity is beautiful. While Ruth worked, Tessa texted a single line. You might want to listen to my next episode. I opened her podcast. The title, The Price of Perfect Marriages, Part 2. She spoke like a journalist with good posture and a small dagger behind every syllable. Midway through, a distorted audio clip played, Keith's voice slurred from some dinner, mocking his wife's coldness. That was me, of course. The internet didn't need names. Listeners built them like crossword answers. Comments piled in real time. He sounds awful, poor woman. Classic ego case. Sympathy is a strange currency. It flows fast, but never evenly. By 3, Keith's firm released a press statement full of corporate foam, words like commitment, values, and temporary suspension. None of it stopped the quiet bleed of clients moving their accounts elsewhere. Grant's assistant called me directly. Mr. Lowell requests a meeting to discuss clarification. Clarification of what? I asked. The documents you distributed. I didn't distribute, I said. I submitted. She hesitated. He insists it's urgent. I'm sure it is, I said, and ended the call. At dusk, I visited a small branch of the bank where we kept a vault. The clerk recognized me from quarterly audits and waved me through. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and metallic trust. My safety box held what most marriages pretend doesn't exist: insurance policies, letters, and, more importantly, copies of Keith's private client agreements. Each file carried traces of his ambition: consulting reimbursements that weren't consulting, client gifts that exceeded ethical limits. Numbers can be loyal if you treat them well. They'd waited years for me to open them again. I scanned the key pages and encrypted them. Then I sent the package to Grant's rival firm, one floor above his own. I didn't include a note. The attachments spoke fluently. When I stepped outside, night had fallen in a clean line across the sky. Rain began with corporate precision, steady, efficient, cleansing. I reached my car, umbrella in hand, when headlights flashed too close. Sharon's sedan swerved into the lot and stopped sideways. She got out, hair wild, eyes bright with the kind of panic that feeds itself. "Elaine," she shouted, "we need to talk." "I don't think we do," I said, opening the car door. She ran forward and slapped it shut. "You can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Ruining us." "You ruined yourselves," I said. "I'm just filing the paperwork." "You don't understand. He's lost everything." The firm froze his accounts. "He's staying with Grant for now, but—" "That won't last," I said. Her breath hitched. "You think this makes you strong?" "I think it makes me free." She lifted her hand and struck my cheek. The sound was sharp, but not shocking. I'd expected it. People reach for contact when they're cornered. I turned my head slowly and looked at her. "Feel better?" Tears formed instantly, as though guilt traveled faster than reason. I opened my bag, pulled out a small stack of papers wrapped with a clip, and handed them to her. "Here," I said. "What is this?" "Read them when you're alone," I said. "They're his messages about you, the unedited versions." She hesitated. "You're lying." "Then don't read them," I said, and got into the car. She stepped back, still holding the pages. "Elaine, please." "Drive safe," I said, and pulled away. In the rearview mirror, she stood under the rain, papers limp in her hand, the ink already beginning to blur. When I got home, Cal was watching a movie with low volume. "You okay?" he asked. "I am." He studied my face. "Something happened." "Just the weather," I said, and went to change. At 11, my phone rang again. Grant's number. I let it go to voicemail. His voice sounded tired, brittle. "We're under review," he said. "You've made your point, but you need to think carefully about what you've started." I replayed it once, then saved the file to my drive. Warnings are valuable data. They mark the exact moment the other side begins to understand the math. Before bed, I updated my personal spreadsheet labeled resolutions. Maserati, sold. Trust fund, secure. Press, leaning sympathetic. Opponents, divided. I added one more line. Next, the gala. Because if you're going to end a story, do it in public, where applause can't be faked. A week later, the city dressed itself in charitable intentions. Posters for the HopeWorks Foundation Gala bloomed on bus shelters and on the firm's internal bulletin like a decal of virtue, naming sponsors, listing honorees, promising a night of glossy kindness. Grant's name sat near the top. Keith's sat a few lines below, paired with a corporate logo, as if a brand could braid itself to a soul and make both look better. I ironed a black dress I hadn't worn since a winter audit banquet. The fabric was simple, the kind that makes noise only when you want it to. Tessa arrived with a garment bag over her shoulder and a smile shaped like strategy. "We're on the list?" she asked. "We are now," I said, sliding 2 lanyards across the counter. "I bought a table yesterday. Anonymous donor." She lifted a brow. "Anonymous?" "Anonymous until the second act." I poured her coffee. "You have the files?" "I do," Tessa said, patting the bag. "Clips cut to time, audio cleaned, title card ready." "Good." I glanced at the clock. "The lights go down at 7:15. Our piece rolls at 7:18. Security will try to stop it by 7:19. We'll be done by 7:20. "You even planned the reactions," she said, impressed. "I planned the room," I said. "Reactions are the room's job." We drove in her hatchback because arriving without a showy car was part of the point. The venue was a restored Art Deco theatre with a lobby that smelled like citrus polish and new money. Guests moved under chandeliers as if they belonged to light. A string quartet soared pleasant background music near the staircase, and cameras clicked along an improvised red carpet where donors let themselves be identified. Sharon stepped from a chauffeured sedan a few minutes after we did, wearing a dress that could have paid a semester of college. Keith reached for her hand, as if she were a life jacket. Their smiles were perfectly practiced, the kind you can press onto your face like a decal and hold there with willpower. Whispered commentary trailed them through the doors, tones of compassion, curiosity, and quiet glee arranged like a cocktail. Tessa leaned toward me. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for years." Inside, the tables were numbered in serif font, candles already lit, centerpieces stacked with white hydrangeas that looked like careful clouds. I had chosen a vantage point along the wall with a clear line to the AV desk. The technician, a young guy with a headset and the concentration of a surgeon, sat behind 2 monitors and a small jungle of cables. I had met him yesterday when I stopped by under the pretense of confirming captions for the tribute reel. Money opened that conversation. A second envelope sealed it. "Evening," he whispered when he caught my eye. "We're on." Tessa and I took our seats. I felt the calm I always felt when a plan reached the moment it needed to stand up on its own. It wasn't triumph or nerves, just the click of a mechanism settling into its notch. The host began with warm jokes about community and tax-deductible generosity. Applause rolled in polite waves. The auctioneer warmed up the crowd with items that were more bragging rights than goods. Dinner with a local celebrity, a weekend in a vineyard, front-row tickets to a playoff game. Numbers rose, paddles flashed, the orchestra offered gentle filler. Keith and Sharon laughed at the right beats, their shoulders touching sometimes, and then deliberately not touching other times, the choreography of people trying to look natural. At 7:14, the host announced the tribute video, a film honoring pillars of service. On the big screen, the Foundation's logo blossomed into a montage of smiling families, volunteers passing boxes hand to hand, ribbon cuttings with shiny scissors, and Grant delivering a keynote in a perfect suit. The audience clapped. The screen faded to black. 7:15. The orchestra stopped. The room breathed. 7:18. The first frame of our cut appeared, a home video from my living room, recorded on a summer evening 7 years ago. Keith held Cal, who was 10, upside down, and made him laugh so hard his shoelaces swung. Sharon stood in the background, smiling with a sister's easy fondness. The crowd offered an awe on cue. Then the montage changed. A shift in color grade, a subtle sharpening of sound, and the home video melted into a clip from a different night, a private dinner at a rooftop bar. Keith leaning in close to a man whose face I had blurred, but whose watch declared its own biography. The subtitles captured his voice. It's simple. You charge the bottle service to client development, you call the envelope miscellaneous, and you don't get caught. A soft murmur stirred the tables. Next, audio played under photos of the firm's holiday parties. Keith's voice again, joking to someone just out of frame. Grant loves a good invoice story. He says if it abstracts well, it absolves well. More murmurs, sharper. People recognize familiar cadences, even when names aren't spoken. The screen cut to a clip from a charity bidding war 2 years ago. Sharon on a stage, holding a paddle with youthful bravado. A voiceover, hers, layered in, pulled from a phone memo she had once recorded for a friend. I changed the family loan paperwork to match what Keith said. It's not lying if everybody wants the same story. You could feel the air shift toward the stage like a tide. At one table, a donor raised his head as if the oxygen content had altered. Keith stood suddenly, scraping his chair. "Turn it off," he said, mirroring the stage rather than speaking to it. "This is out of context." No one moved. The host froze, hand halfway to his lapel mic. The AV tech pressed the second button we'd rehearsed. Screens across the hall, projectors, side displays, even the small screens in the lobby, locked to the feed. The video didn't just play, it installed itself. "What did you do?" Tessa whispered, eyes bright. "Anchored the file," I said. "Once it starts, it finishes." On screen, the imagery went colder. Excel spreadsheets slid into view, cells highlighted, notes in the margins, small arrows pointing to line items labeled client gift, consultation meal, miscellaneous reimbursement. Then the numbers rearranged into clean totals and a caption appeared. Outflows labeled as kindness. The camera cut to Grant on a panel, saying with a statesman's calm, "Integrity is not a policy, it is habit." Underneath, a date stamp. Then an overlay of an email from his assistant reminding him to review Keith's expense packet before compliance asks again. Someone in the audience laughed once, sharp and involuntary. Keith stepped toward the aisle, the way a person moves when they believe proximity can will a thing to stop. Sharon grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said. He shook free and headed for the AV desk. Security, alerted by the host's panicked glance, started across the room at a firm walk. It wasn't a sprint. It was the posture of men paid to look like assurance. Before they arrived, the screen went black again and came back with a final section. Audio clips intercut with still photos. Sharon's voice, hushed but distinct. "I can fix the loan documents. No one reads the second page." Keith's voice, smug with a private laugh. "Client kickbacks? Call them referral appreciation. Words carry umbrellas." The audience didn't gasp this time. They didn't look away either. Phones came out like flowers seeking light. Screens lit laps and faces. The room wasn't scandalized. It was awake. Keith reached the AV desk and leaned across it. "Turn it off," he ordered, low and deliberate. The technician, young, brave, and exactly as I had hoped, kept his hands on the console and shook his head. "It's scheduled, sir." "You don't understand who I am." The tech glanced at the nearest security guard, who lifted his palm, a silent request for space. Keith pulled the lanyard badge from around his neck, as if an emblem might morph into authority if held higher. Authority didn't show up. The video kept going. A slide of anonymous text messages scrolled past, the telltale cadence of lovers who believed privacy was as simple as a lock screen. No names, just pronouns, times, and a repeated pattern of casual cruelty. "She'll never notice. She's too focused on numbers. I'm the future of this firm." I felt something familiar move through me. Not anger, not satisfaction, just the steady weight of facts finally taking their own shape in a room that couldn't pretend not to see them. Tessa touched my wrist. "You don't even look nervous." "I've seen audits with less documentation get through a board," I said. "This is generous by comparison." On stage, the host tried to reclaim the mic, but the sound had been routed through our feed. When he spoke, only the front 2 tables heard him. The rest of the room remained tuned to the display. He tried again, then gave up and stood with his hands folded, the posture of a person who senses he's in a photo that will live longer than his name. Sharon sat back down and stared at the screen as if it held a puzzle she might still solve. She looked younger and older at once. I thought of her bracelets in my drawers when we were teens, bright circles of cheap plastic that she loved like treasure. Some habits evolve, some don't. The final clip arrived. Keith and Grant in a private office, the city at night behind them. The audio wasn't crystal. We'd cleaned it as far as it could go without enhancing into fiction. It was enough. Keith: if the number lands overseas, the noise stops here. Grant: make sure the memo says it's for consulting, and for heaven's sake, keep your assistant away from the attachments. Then, silence on the clip. Not the theatrical kind. Just the vacuum around a plan spoken to plainly. The screen faded to a title card. Truth looks good on you. A simple sentence, white letters on black. Then the house lights rose as if the theatre itself wanted perspective. Keith turned toward the audience, struggling to build a counter-story with his face. "This is character assassination," he said, voice steady but frayed at the edges. "You people are smarter than this. It's edited. It's wrong." Someone at a nearby table called out, "Then sue the editor," and people laughed with the relief of a line that named what everyone already knew. I stood. Tessa rose with me. We walked the perimeter toward the aisle. Keith saw us and cut across the room to intercept. Sharon half a step behind him. He stopped 3 feet from me. Up close, he looked like a man who had rehearsed confidence in mirrors and suddenly found them stripped from the walls. "What do you want?" he asked. "Accuracy," I said. "Is that what you call this?" "It's nicer than what you call it." He glanced at Tessa. "You did this," he said. "She produced," I said. "I sourced." Sharon's voice came small. "Why, Elaine?" "Because you were building a church out of receipts," I said. "Because you thought the city would bless you for it. Because you counted on me not to count." He lowered his voice. "Turn it off?" "It's already off," I said, "but it won't feel that way for a while." Security reached us. The older guard spoke in a tone designed to calm expensive situations. "Let's keep the walkway clear, folks." Keith looked as if he might lunge past him toward the stage, then recognized the cameras still held high in hands around us. He swallowed and stepped back. "This is defamation," he announced for the phones. "We'll address it in court." "Do," I said. "Bring your receipts." I turned away. Tessa and I walked toward the doors, past faces that tried not to stare, and failed. Outside, the evening was cool, the air rinsed by a breeze that smelled like wet pavement. A row of black cars idled, their drivers watching the entrance with the neutral gaze of people paid to witness quietly. Tessa laughed once, sharp and delighted. "You're a legend," she said. "You know that." "I'm a person who got tired," I said. "Legend is someone else's label." My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number, which wasn't unknown at all. "Grant, you win. He's finished." "But what did you send the board exactly?" I stared at the words. Tessa leaned over. "What now?" "Now?" I slipped the phone into my clutch. "We go home." "Just like that?" "Just like that," I said. "The film's over. The credits will take care of themselves." We crossed the sidewalk. Behind us, the theatre doors opened and breathed out a swell of voices. They sounded like people discovering that smoke machines can't hide everything once real air gets in. Somewhere inside, a string quartet restarted with a frantic tune not on their program, and the host thanked everyone for their generosity in a voice 1 key too high. On the ride home, Tessa rolled down her window and let the night compose itself around us, streetlights passing in even intervals, crosswalk signals keeping time. She kept sneaking glances at me, as if she were trying to memorize a version of the story that hadn't happened yet. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm calculating," I said. "Tomorrow's calls, the board's next steps. Cal's morning. Whether the grocery still has the good berries if I stop early." She laughed softly. "How do you live in 2 worlds at once? The opera and the errand list?" "It's one world," I said. It only looks divided if you don't track the line items. When she dropped me off, the porch light came on, like a nod. I stood a moment, bag still in hand, and listened to the gentle appliances of my house. The hum, the faint tick of cooling pipes, the breath of a place that had survived a storm more procedural than meteorological. My phone buzzed once more. The same number, no new words. I ignored it. I locked the door. I hung my dress carefully and set my shoes side by side as if aligning them could align anything else. In the kitchen, I rinsed an apple and ate it over the sink like a cliché, because clichés exist where humans repeat themselves. The sweetness steadied me. Upstairs, Cal slept. A thin bar of hallway light laid across his carpet. Tomorrow, I would tell him about the gala in the same tone I used to explain interest compounding. Simple, factual, no weight he didn't need to carry. The world would do its loud thing. Inside our house, the rule would stay the same. Truth first, documents ready, kindness where you can afford it. Before bed, I wrote a new line in the resolution sheet. Gala executed. Narrative transferred from rumor to record. Then I added another. Message from G. Request for inventory of board submission. I didn't answer the message. Not tonight. You can't control the second act if you talk through the applause. I turned out the light and let quiet find its chair. The city would read and forward and react. The firm would gather its counsel and reframe. Keith would practice statements in a mirror and rehearse the version where he was misunderstood. Sharon would stare at her reflection and try to see a future not built on someone else's ladder. Grant would scroll through an inbox that felt like a hallway closing in. And Tessa, already at her desk, would edit, schedule, and sleep, because tomorrow needed a headline with clean verbs. I slept, knowing that in the morning I'd have a dozen messages and one decision to confirm, whether to answer Grant's question or let it hang like a light over a locked door. Either way, the room he stood in had changed. The architecture wouldn't allow the old steps anymore. When the sun pulled itself over the city, the house reminded me gently that ordinary life was still a ledger you had to maintain. The sink asked for mugs to be washed. The calendar blinked a school reminder. The sweater on the back of the chair wanted a hanger. Not everything is drama. Most of it is upkeep. People ruin themselves forgetting that. Still, as I brushed my teeth, the phone lit quietly on the counter with the last line I read before the day began. You win. He's finished. But what did you send the board exactly? It sat there, a neat little sentence, waiting for an answer designed to do more than sting. Not yet, I told it in my head. Not today. The plan had one movement left, and it would not be rushed. 2 months later, the house smelled like lemon polish again. I'd promised myself it would. The same oak table waited under the same chandelier. Only this time, the light fell on fewer chairs. The empty spaces looked intentional, like missing data that explained itself. I set the plates anyway. Habit, not hope. Each fork aligned with the edge of the charger, each napkin folded into a small square. Nothing dramatic, nothing sentimental. Order steadies the pulse. Cal came down from his room, taller now, the quiet confidence of someone who had seen how adults break and how they stand back up. They're really coming, he asked. They asked to, I said. Why'd you say yes? Because closure likes an audience. He nodded, not approving, not resisting, just understanding. He placed the pitcher of water on the table, centered it the way I'd taught him years ago. At 6 sharp, a car rolled into the driveway. I saw its reflection on the window before the knock sounded. When I opened the door, Keith stood there, thinner, older, his confidence worn down like a bad eraser. Sharon stood behind him, hair pulled back, eyes shadowed. They looked like people who had rehearsed courage in a motel mirror. Elaine, Keith said, can we talk? You're here, I said. That's talking. He tried to smile and failed. May we come in? I stepped aside. The word may always amused me. Lawyers use it when they want mercy disguised as manners. They walked into the dining room and stopped, both staring at the table as if it were a monument to better days. Sharon whispered, "You set the table." "It's dinner," I said. "Not nostalgia." We sat. Cal moved between rooms quietly, bringing bread, setting glasses. He was calm the way storms are calm when they know their direction. Keith cleared his throat. "You've made your point, Elaine. I lost my position. Grant resigned. The firm's restructuring. You got what you wanted." "I got what was mine," I said. Sharon folded her hands. "We didn't come to fight. We came to find some understanding." "You misunderstand me if you think I need that." Keith leaned forward. "Please, I know I broke everything. I know you have no reason to care. But this—" He gestured around the room. "This isn't good for anyone. For Cal. For you." I looked at him carefully. "You're worried about my wellness now." "I'm worried about all of us," he said. "That's generous, considering you redefined us without consulting the membership." He sighed, ran a hand through hair that had learned stress. "I can't undo what's happened, but maybe we can—" "No," I said. "You can't." Silence stretched, brittle but not unbearable. Sharon looked at her lap. "We're in trouble, Elaine. Financially. The trust you moved, Keith's name isn't anywhere on it. The condo's under audit. We have nowhere to go." "You have each other," I said. "That's not enough." "It was supposed to be everything," I said. "That's what you told him." She flinched. "You don't have to punish us." "Punish," I repeated. "You think this is punishment. This is arithmetic. You spent what you didn't own and the account settled." Keith reached across the table, palm open. "Elaine, please. For Cal's sake, let's find peace." "Peace isn't a group project," I said. "It's balance. You balance what you owe." He exhaled slowly, the sound of someone trying not to lose the little dignity left. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you," I said. "That's the point." Before he could answer, another knock sounded. The door opened without waiting. Cal walked in, not as a boy but as someone with authority. He carried a folder, thick with papers, and a small recording device. "You wanted to talk about me?" he asked evenly. Keith froze. Sharon's eyes widened. "Cal, honey." He didn't look at her. "Mum said you had questions about my future. I figured I'd answer in person." He placed the folder on the table and opened it. "This is the statement from the family trust. As of last month, it's transferred solely under my control, with a clause removing both of you from access. It's legal. Mum reviewed it. The lawyer confirmed." Keith's mouth opened, then shut. "You, what?" "It's my college fund. And my boundary," Cal said. Sharon whispered, "You're turning him against us." I didn't speak. Cal handled it himself. "I turned myself," he said. "I watched how things worked." He slid another paper across the table. "This is the title to the house. It's paid off. Mum owns it outright. You can't claim it." Keith's hand twitched toward the folder. "Cal, that's not—" "Don't," Cal said softly. "You always said honesty was strength. I'm being strong." The doorbell chimed again. Tessa entered, camera slung over her shoulder, casual but purposeful. "Don't mind me," she said. "Documenting truth for a piece I'm writing, after the scandal." Keith shot me a glare. "You invited a reporter." "She's a friend," I said, "and a witness. This is harassment." "This is transparency," I said. Sharon looked around the table like a trapped actor searching for a line. "Elaine, please. Can't we stop this?" I studied her face, the same small freckle near her lip that I used to tease her about, the same eyes that had once asked me to braid her hair before school. Memory tried to rise, but I kept it in check. "You had a chance to stop," I said quietly. "You didn't." Keith leaned back. "So this is revenge?" "It's record-keeping," I said. "Every transaction needs closure." Cal stood beside me now, shoulders level with mine. "I'm staying here," he said. "Mum's house, my choice. You both taught me what commitment costs. I'll pay attention. Tessa lifted her camera, framing the table. This is powerful, she murmured. Keith snapped, Turn that off. Tessa didn't flinch. Public interest, she said. I looked at him one last time. You taught me the art of appearances, I said. You crafted stories to keep your world intact. Tonight's just the correction. He laughed without humor. You think people will keep admiring you when they know how calculated you are? I don't need admiration, I said. I need accuracy. The rain began outside, soft at first, then steadier, brushing against the windows like quiet applause. Sharon pressed her napkin to her eyes. Elaine, please, we can't start over. Help us. I stood. You started over the day you chose each other. I'm not responsible for maintenance. Keith rose too, anger barely held. You think this makes you better? No, I said. It makes me finished. The words landed with a weight that felt final. Cal gathered the papers back into the folder, placed them neatly, and said, We're done. Keith's voice cracked through the quiet. Elaine? I held up my phone, already recording. I'd suggest leaving now. He stared at it, recognizing the trap he couldn't argue out of. Sharon tugged at his sleeve. Slowly they turned toward the door. Before leaving, Sharon looked back once. Do you ever forgive? I met her gaze. Not when the debt is still open. They stepped outside into the rain. The porch light caught their figures, two silhouettes shrinking into weather they couldn't control. Tessa lowered the camera. You sure you want to end it like that? It ended a long time ago, I said. Tonight was just the accounting. Cal began clearing the table, moving quietly, methodically. I joined him, stacking plates, rinsing glasses. Tessa watched for a while, then gathered her gear. You know this will be everywhere tomorrow, she said. I know, I said. Truth travels. When she left, the house exhaled. The clock ticked with the confidence of something finally back on time. Cal turned to me. Are you okay? I am now, I said. He smiled faintly. You didn't raise me to lie, did you? No, I said. I raised you to verify. We finished the dishes in silence. Outside, the rain deepened, steady and cleansing. When everything was put away, I walked back to the table and touched the wood surface, tracing the grain that had seen it all. The first dinner, the last. Keith and Sharon would spend months trying to rebuild narratives. Grant would testify before committees and blame junior partners. The city would gossip, then forget. But in this room, the truth had already settled like dust after renovation. Quiet, visible in the light, impossible to hide once seen. I sat with a fresh cup of tea, watching the window. Cal went upstairs, footsteps even. I opened my notebook, added one final line beneath all the old entries. Account closed. Balance reconciled. Outside, a car engine started, then faded down the street. I let the sound dissolve. The look on their faces at that table, half disbelief, half realization, stayed with me longer than anger ever did. It was the image I'd promised myself the night everything cracked, the proof that numbers and intentions can finally match. Unforgettable. That's the word I'd use in my report if anyone ever asked for a summary. But no one will. Because when a story ends cleanly, people move on. I smiled. A small ledger balanced at last, and turned out the light.